Hello, good morning. This is Greg. How are you?
Hey, Greg, this is Ro. How are you?
Good. Hey, thanks for presenting and participating in our conference.
Thanks for putting this together. Thanks for being my goose to this. I don't want to call myself Maverick, right? But thanks for being goose to my Maverick.
Oh, sure. Of course. We should have another moderator that'll be joining us shortly.
Sweet.
That'll help with monitoring any of the Q&A on the room page, as well as anything in the Slack channel for room 5.
Sweet.
So you can just focus on your presentation and yeah.
I can, so I don't see my camera. I'm going to trust I look good.
Well, all I see right now is your slide. So
really, I should,
yeah.
How do I make it? Every presentation I've seen like the person's camera in the upper right-hand corner.
Right. It looks like your camera is turned off in Zoom.
Oh, let me do that. Start video.
There we go.
All right.
And so yeah, you're off to the side by default, but
okay, there I go.
If you'd rather be like at the top, I think I can switch it to that. Did that move it up to the top for you?
If you know, I think, I don't know. Top corner is what I'm used to seeing. So, but so I adjusted my slides accordingly to leave that space open.
Yeah, so I'll leave it like this, if that's all right. Because I don't know how to make Zoom like overlay it. I don't know if Zoom will do that.
Well, if it is what it is.
Yeah.
We'll let Swarm, whatever.
Loud Swarm.
Let them do their thing. My camera's on.
Yep, your camera's on. I hear you. I see your screen. Those are the most important things to have ready.
Those are. I've got my notes off screen. So
right.
That's the most important part to me.
Sure. Yeah.
Cool. Well, how was the keynote?
Oh, the keynote was great. I don't know if you were able to watch it or not, but it'll be available on YouTube after the event as well. So
yeah,
it's worth going back and watching. It wasn't very long. It was only like a half an hour, so not a huge time commitment either.
Yeah, no, long story short, anxiety. So I'll watch it later. But yeah, you were going to say something?
Oh, yeah, I was just going to go over a couple of tips for you.
Sure.
One, I don't know if you've done kind of an online conference sort of presentation like this before, but the interaction is very different than an in-person one. And so one of the hardest things I think for a lot of the presenters is just that, not being able to see your audience, not see someone like raise their hand and want to ask a question.
Sure.
I don't know if you were planning on pausing for questions or holding them to the end, but there's also like a 30-second-ish delay between what you're sending over your internet connection and getting up to LoudSwarm and back down to the attendees. And so if you were going to pause for questions, it's a good idea to say, I'm going to pause for questions now. I'll have my moderator help look. And
yeah, let's do that. Let me just walk you through my slides real quick, and I'll just give you a heads up on where those natural stopping points are. Okay. So I'm going to do the welcome, going to do the motivation piece. And I think here would be a good spot. I can't imagine there'll be a ton of questions at this point, but if there are questions, here, I'll even put it in my notes. Questions.
Yeah, I mean,
if there are questions, they're going to be really basic. And so we probably want to get those out of the way before we jump, because the next step is we're jumping into the tools.
Yeah, so what I would do is at that point, before
I'll stop for questions
about it. Well, what I was going to say is you got to give people a good minute or more
30 seconds. Respond. Okay.
Because they won't hear it for 30 seconds, but then it's going to take them a little bit of time to type up and think about their question. So I would say as part of this slide, say, I'm going to pause for questions here, but I would love to connect with you on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, here are my links, whatever. And it basically allows you to fill in that 30 to 60 seconds where they will be
that minute
doing that. And then, you can pause briefly and say, okay, are there any questions? If there are, yes, answer them. If no, then you can just keep moving ahead, and it doesn't really interrupt the flow. There's not this weird big space of dead time. So yeah, that's been a really successful way for people to do it. And, we caught that early on because there was like this huge awkward pause, and it's like, yeah, that's not going to work.
Yeah. So then this is brief. And this part, I'm just going to break out. So basically, the rest of the talk is 4 steps. What I'll do is at the beginning of the analyze step, I'll pause for questions. Again, I'll do the exact same thing you recommended. I'll mention it, give people a chance to write their questions, and then just proceed with the analyze slide.
Right.
Questions.
And then I would also go in.
And then at the end.
Yeah, certainly at the end, leave that open for some Q&A.
And I have a question slide, so.
There's been a real mixed bag looking at all of the sessions. Some have had, half dozen or more questions. Some have had one. I did a session yesterday, and there was one comment, but no questions. And so, yeah, I wish I could tell you what to expect, but
Sure. I wanted to try and use the poll, and I want to say I have experience presenting, and I have experience with this kind of a format. I felt like the poll was just a little bit too much. Maybe next year. Well, hopefully next year.
It is a feature that is available. It would have been, nice to do a dry run with it or something. So
yeah, I definitely. Yeah, I think that's because I'm not familiar with the software that uses it, and I just didn't want to have another screen.
Right. Well, and we'd have to set it up, and you definitely don't want to have that screen up because it's A, distracting, and B, if it's not muted, then you get a really funky, 30-second delayed echo.
Oh.
And so, yeah. Oh, here's Keith. He's probably going to be your moderator.
Sweet.
Hello, Keith.
How you
doing? Good. Keith, how you doing?
Good. How is everything for you?
Happy Friday.
Yes, I am looking forward to it being Friday. I assume you are as well. Everyone loves Friday.
I'm gonna be really great in about 45 minutes.
Yeah, I can relate. I got notified of this later than I was comfortable trying to come up with something in volunteering. It's very.
Did ya?
Yeah, well, it's very, I mean, that's why I'm only moderating, or partially at least. So
fair enough.
You for
but thanks for volunteering. I can't say, I will. So know that when I give my little thank you part of my talk, that I am directing it to you as well.
Well,
and Greg, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, both of you. Thank you.
I renamed myself yesterday and it took it off, but instead of being room 5, I put Greg at the end to make that stick out a little more.
Greg, I want to make sure. I've not seen anything come up in Slido yet, ever. Should I expect it to just work if I go to that link?
Yeah, if you want to put in a test question now, you can do that, and then I'll go clear it out in just a second.
Okay, all right, cool.
That way you can see it. One of the things we keep seeing is moderation keeps getting turned on there, and so
is that the problem?
Show up.
Okay. I could not tell if that was deliberate or not. I might have done that.
Yeah, we want moderation off, so that way the questions show straight up, and if there is something offensive or whatever, then we'll just go remove it. But the Slido is not part of the recording, so we're not too worried about, having to take something down if there is something goofy that gets posted there.
Gotcha. This thing popped up the weird type your question. Okay, my question went in there. It looks like oh, there we go. It popped up.
Yeah, so I'll go clear that out as soon as we start the session. So I got to go switch computers, so we'll do that in just a second. But Rho, if you want to go back to your intro slide, basically what we're going to do here in 1 minute is I will start the live stream. That takes anywhere from 2 to 20 seconds. I wish it was more consistent. It's usually closer to the 2 side, but sometimes it's a little laggy. And then up at the top of the Zoom meeting, you will see where it says recording now. Right next to that, there'll be a red live thing as soon as it goes live. Okay. And so, just give that 1 or 2 seconds once it shows up to make sure things are smooth. And you can introduce the speaker. This isn't your first rodeo, so you kind of know what we need to do there.
Sure.
Ro, would you like a more formal introduction? Do you have an intro slide? I mean, I know you have
I
the
do.
one.
I do. Keith, you can do whatever you want. I will.
Yeah,
I will.
there's not much information about the presenter in the
Yeah, so it's fine.
in the loud swarm. So I was
Right.
going to
I
ask.
had one quick question. Are you guys seeing me
Yep.
I see you.
switch through the desktops
Well, I see you in the Zoom itself.
on the slide share? Are you seeing my presentation and now a website and
Yep.
now an Excel doc
Yep.
and now okay? Just want to make sure I'm sharing the screen, not.
Yes, you're sharing
Yep.
the screen. I
And-
see the speaker view to the right of that, but that's like
Perfect.
yeah.
And it is time to get started. So are we good? Any other questions?
I'm good. Let's do it.
All right, I'm going to hit the live stream button in 3, 2, 1.
All right, I see that coming up. Recording is happening. Okay, good.
All right, we should be good.
All right.
All right, I'm going to get started. Keith, are we good to go?
Yeah, I think so.
All right,
Go
let's
for it,
get
Ro.
started. Well, guys, gals, everyone, thanks for coming. We're going to spend the next 45 minutes talking about churn analysis. And we're going to be doing it in Excel, R, and Python. And so if you're expecting something else, now's your chance to find it. I want to take a second or just a minute to acknowledge Utah Geek Events and our sponsors. I have been attending, this is my first time speaking at this conference. I attended this conference about 4 years ago, and something I don't normally tell people, and since I'm in a room by myself and I have no idea who I'm talking to right now, it doesn't feel as weird. I don't normally tell people that I have imposter syndrome, but I do, and it's pretty bad. And 4 years ago, right, I started coming to these events, and this conference is just like, this is like the keynote experience of the year. There is a slew of other activities that are orchestrated through a variety of meetups, and Pat is an integral part of that. Some other people that work really hard behind the scenes are John Curley Weeks, who I've gotten to know. I consider him a friend. I consider them both of them friends. I hope that you think of me as a friend. Mariah Peterson runs a Go users group that Weave supports. So you don't see Weave on the list here, but they do a lot to support her and her group down below the point of the mountain. There's just a ton of people, and there's a ton that's happening. At the core of it is Pat's organization, Utah Geek Events. And I have been the recipient of a huge, I mean, my career has grown, my technical skills have grown, and it's in no small part to what's being done here. And so to the volunteers, to Pat, to sponsors, everybody, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I can't say enough. And so I just wanted to take that moment to say that before we get into it. So why are you here? So I don't believe that you're here to learn about churn. I don't believe that you're a math nerd like I am, and that you're here because you want to learn about the nuances of logistic regression. That's just not, I don't think that's why you're here. I think you're here because you have customers and you engage with customers. You might be an entrepreneur, you might be a CEO, a COO, you might be a product owner, a client success manager, you might be a more technical person that's interested in the business side, or you might be just killing time. But most people when we start kind of like, I like data, I'm a data nerd. When we start that discussion in a professional setting, this is probably the most common question I get asked is, who are my customers? Why are they leaving? What can we do to stop them from leaving? We want to keep our customers and we want to keep them happy. And so how do we do that? And it's a noble desire. And we're going to get into that. Like, what can we do to deliver on that noble desire? So we're going to look at a case study. We're going to look at some actual data. The data is, we're going to look at some actual data. This company, they're having a hard time. 36% of their customers are leaving them, and 30% of them are leaving in the first 3 years. And this is not a short-term, they don't offer a short-term service. This is a telecom company. You know, you think about your own phone, like office phone. This is not something that, it's not like a new iPhone's coming out. Like, they should be holding on to customers, and they're not. And that's concerning to them. They want to know what's going on. So imagine imagine this is your company, and 36% of the customers that you help are leaving. And the CEO is approaching you, and maybe you are the CEO, but regardless, the message is the same. This is your job to fix. This is your mess. Like, you got to figure it out. What are you going to do? And I would hope, since you're here, that looking at data might be part of that solution. But take a moment and think about it. What do you do? If you're going to look at data, what data are you going to look at? And how are you going to go about making decisions based on what you find? What does that even mean? What is conscientious stupidity? I've heard the word conscientious. I Googled it to try and figure that out. Right? How can someone be sincerely ignorant? And where's the danger? Or what are the dangers? And for when I read that, I think what's scary is the noble desire that we were talking about a second ago to keep customers and to keep them happy. That's not enough. We need to be able to see below the surface. And so as I introduce myself, I'm going to pause for a moment for questions. So if you have a question, type it in. We'll give you about a minute, and then we'll move on. But I'm a business intelligence analyst. I work for a company called Agility Digital. Got their website here. So this is us. We do geofencing, programmatic advertising. And so very cool stuff, very techie stuff, very fun, lots of data. I've been working with data for a long time, a really long time. And I get it. Like, I actually had in my career, I've had the opportunity to consult people who are digging into data for the first time. Like, they're wrangling with their data for the first time. And many of them are seasoned Excel users, but they're digging into larger amounts of data for the first time. They might be pushing the limits of what Excel can do. And it's painful. It's so painful. And there are two parts to the struggle. One, we talked about, is that fight against ignorance to win the day, to keep your customer. But the second is this unavoidable, frustrating suck. And it's just, that's the nature of working with data. And I've found that as I've told them that the suck and the frustration is part of it, that helps. That helps to realize that's just part of the experience, that even though I've been wrangling data in Excel and other tools for the better part of 20 years, and it still sucks for me. And I think anyone who works with data will tell you it's the worst part. is wrangling the data, getting through it, digging in, finding the bad data, cleaning it up, and all that stuff. And just knowing that it sucks is soothing. It's like a balm. And so we'll get into that a little bit. Oh, and there's the math as well. Maths are hard, as my boss used to say. So let's take a second before we keep going. Keith, are there any questions? Are we good to keep going?
Yeah, I think we're good. I do not see any popped into Slido.
Okay,
here.
good. If you have questions, we're going to stop periodically to grab them. So if you have questions, just throw them in, and we'll just keep going. So tools, you should be familiar with Excel. I'm going to assume if you're in this meeting that you know Excel. I'm not going to do a huge amount of tutorial in Excel. The purpose of demoing Excel is to give you context. As we're looking at the other tools, I love Excel. Excel is the most democratic data tool on the planet. And so, yeah, I could tell you about my love affair with Excel. It goes back to when I was a wee lad. But yeah, we're going to talk a little bit about Excel. We're going to show you kind of what you probably are already doing in Excel, and then how that translates into these other tools. These are actual tools, right? So Python and R are languages, but we're actually going to get into tools that leverage those languages, give you a user interface that if you're engaging with a language for the first time, I think having Anaconda or R Studio is less intimidating than jumping into VS Code. And I'm using them on a Mac, but I cut my teeth on a Dell, so they're cross-compatible platform-wise. Like the use case is about the same. Not the use case, the user experience. And then we're going to use these tools so these are the steps. I think of everything that I say, if you're going to write something down, write this down. I think it'll give you some context and a strategy of how to engage your data. So we're going to talk about looking at the data, wrangling the data, which we touched on earlier. That's the suck. Analyzing the data, and then reporting on the data. So looking. First step is to actually just look at your data. So we're going to just look at the data. Where are we at? We're at got a little better than 15 minutes. So we're not going to spend a ton of time looking at the data, but let's just we've got 21 columns of data. I don't know if you can see the very bottom of my screen, but we've got just over 7,000 records, which this is not an insignificant amount of data. We're looking at customers. We've got some demographics, gender, if they're married, do they have kids, how long they've been with the company, different services that they're buying, whether they do auto bill, paperless, what their monthly charges are, what their total charges are, and at the very end, we've got a column to labeling whether they've left the company or not. So this is the data. Looks like we've got a mixture of text and numbers, but most of these, even though they're text and numbers, most of these are binary values. Most of these are yes or no. Internet service, there's 3 options. You could turn that into like a yes or no. Do they have internet service? Don't they have internet service? I'm not going to take the time because we don't have the time, but just looking at the data, like getting a sense of what do I have, and then what do I want? Like that's a great question to ask. Do I have, one of the questions that this particular company is asking, concerned about, are people leaving us because of our internet options? Like they want to go, they don't want cable, they don't want fiber, they don't want DSL, they want cable. And so are people with DSL and fiber more likely to leave? That's kind of the pressing question that drove this analysis. Let's come back here. So it's helpful to look at that, and that takes us to our second step, right? We're going to whiz through this. This is the suck. On one side, you might feel like you're starting to see some insights. On the other, you might feel like you're drowning. And so this is where we're going to go to our, so this is where you're probably really familiar with this pivot table, right? I don't know that I can close that because my camera's in the way. But this is a basic pivot table. I'm going to bring it out to the middle. All right, this is something you've seen before, I'm sure. I'm sure you can do this quickly. And I'm actually going to ask, maybe Keith can give us a summary. I'm curious. So this is a pivot table. What we're pivoting is churn. You saw this over here. We're looking at churn and internet service over the counts of customers. And we're specifically looking at the rate of churn coming down. And so what you're seeing is a clear trend with fiber optic at the top. And you've got DSL here in the middle in this darker color. And then people who don't have internet service. And visually, there definitely looks like there's a separation between the rate at which people are leaving who have fiber versus nothing, and a slightly smaller, but still it looks significant to me. I'm curious what you guys think. If you ran this pivot table, would you be concerned that lack of a cable option is a driving force for churn? Just something to think about. And put your answers in the comments, and we can look at those in a little bit and see where people are at.
I'm out of curiosity for my own understanding, because this is very new to me, but I can speak since I'm your helpful moderator.
Sure. Let's do it.
So the
Should I go back to the slide, to the table?
Yeah, if you go back to the slide briefly. So the left, so the y-axis there, that is the amount of churn, and the number along the y or x-axis there, that's like a date.
Their tenure. So yeah, tenure. We've got some time. So what I've done, I've taken this raw data in the pivot table at the very top, and then I've converted it just into percentages and each time period. So this is 1 represents they left after a month. 2 is they left after 2 months. 3, they left after 3 months, and so on. So what you've got is every month, the percentage of people that left during that month. And then over the x-axis, you've got your time, and it goes from 1 to 72.
I see. And do you have a sense of the size of number of customers that have each of these 3 services, or one,
yes,
the other, none?
So we can break this pivot table, but yes, we do have a sense, right? Actually, we don't have to break this pivot table. We can just go over to the side. If we look at the grand totals, remember what's over here. So we've got no, and then yes. So no is no, they did not churn. Yes is yes, they did churn. And we've got in order DSL, fiber, and no internet. So if you want to look at those numbers, they're over here, right? So altogether, most of these customers, 5,000 did not churn. And of that group, that's the breakout of, it looks pretty even, right? 1,900, 1,700, 1,400. And then you've got the group that did churn is about 1,869. And there's some difference here, right? 459, almost 1,300 have fiber, and 113 don't have internet.
Right.
And so
people not having internet, it looks like, didn't really churn because they didn't care about the internet. People that had fiber, I guess, seems like they churned a lot more, but people who have DSL also churned a lot more than people who don't have internet. So I guess people who want internet were more likely to churn, is what I'm getting from what you were saying by looking at this graph as well. So
right, and now I don't think you're alone. I see that too, right? Which is part of why this type of work is important.
So we do have one question.
Sure.
Is there a control As in like, and he was asking what the bottom trend line is.
Oh, bottom trend line is no, they don't have internet.
Right. So there's, yeah.
Or they don't have internet with these guys.
Right. And so I guess, is there like, I think a control in this case might be some company that this company is seeing worse churn than might be a control. Is that maybe what someone would be looking for?
So I'm gonna go move forward, because whoever that is gets the candy bar, right? There's 21 different columns, right, in that table, and we're literally only looking at this one. And so looking at this in context of everything else, like whoever said control, yeah, you're definitely on the right. You're jumping ahead. You're on the right track. I think we'll address that indirectly. We didn't look at control relative to another company, but we are. That is a great insight. That's a great question. I'm going to move on so that we can get to kind of answering that. Is that cool? Keith, you good to move?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay.
Fitz, if you want any more clarification on that, I think he, like you said, he nailed it. We can use the non-internet holders as a control group, because at least if we're asking the question, are they leaving because they don't like the internet service?
Right. So yeah. Oh, I didn't really understand. So no, yes, you can. And yes, so we're going to keep going.
Good to go.
So we're looking at data. I'm on my other screen. Are we done with this? We might not be done with it, but we'll come back to it. I moved ahead. This is my favorite slide. Come back to it. This wrangling part, getting the data to a point where you can analyze it and do what we're about to do, which is the logistic regression. This is actually something that a coworker said to me one day, and it stuck with me through the years. And I think it's very applicable. To give you a sense, right? We're only looking at one document. We're looking at one data set on one Excel sheet. But you might have 15 different documents or tables in a database. And you have to join them or connect them. And so then you take that times, you might be doing that for more than one customer. And you've got a team of people that are doing this and coming to you with questions about like inconsistencies. It's a non-linear scale. It can grow exponentially. It can get really crazy. But if you're prepared for it, and you know ahead of time that that's part of the game, it can be incredibly empowering as well. If you're a nerd, if you're a jock, that's why you handle nerds, or not handle. That's why you hire nerds. And then the other thing I touched on, which I'll talk about now, is volume. Like Excel has over 1 million rows, just over 1 million rows that theoretically you can use. But in my personal experience, depending on what kind of computer you're using, it starts bogging down between 76,000 and 100,000 records. And you start getting into that range or much more than 100,000 records. And Excel just starts, you can't analyze the data, you can't manipulate the data. It becomes problematic. And so yesterday I was working with a data set that actually crashed my SQL Pro. And ultimately it was about 36 million records that I was working with. And I threw it into Python. So I had to pull it out of SQL Pro in pieces because SQL Pro couldn't run my queries. And I threw it into Python, and I thought I'd have to process it in pieces, but I lumped it all together to see what it can do. And Python on my MacBook Pro killed it in like 30 seconds. Actually, that's not fair. It took about 2 minutes to load the data into memory. And then it absolutely crushed it in like 30 seconds. And it took my raw data and spit out the report in like 30 seconds after the data loaded into the file. So just to give you a sense, like if you're seeing that Excel is lagging, right, that's the time where you have a big enough amount of data that you should really be looking at another tool like Python or R. So we're going to get into the analysis. So this is the maths, right? I know, hard. You can ignore the Greek part, just focus on the picture. Most people are familiar with the regression line. They're familiar with the concept of a line being drawn through a cloud of points and the best fit. What we're doing here with churn data, you can't really draw a standard regression line, which I will mention you can do in Excel. You can do linear model, regular old regression in Excel. But if you only have 2 data points, if you only have yes or no, and you try to draw a line through that, and you try to predict based on that line, you're going to miss. So I don't know if you can see my cursor or my mouse.
Yeah, I can, unless looking
so
at CloudForm doesn't work. But
maybe CloudForm might not work. Anyway, towards the bottom, right at the x-axis, you'll probably predict at the bottom, and then all the way, like on the extreme ends, you'll get it right, but in the middle, where it matters, you won't get anything. And so what we're doing here is we're just taking that basic regression line and we're transforming it into something that's a little bit better fit to this binary choice of yes or no, X or Y, 0 or 1. And it kind of looks like an S. It's that orange line in the middle. And so what we'll do, very high level, is we're just taking the data, throwing it into that linear model, which that you're familiar, you've seen this before. This is y equals mx plus b, which all of us did in high school. It's a fancy way to write y equals mx plus b. It's a line. We're taking that y equals mx plus b, throwing it into a fraction with an exponent, and it is giving us a better fit for what we're doing. I skipped. So we talked about R. We did a little bit of, not R, we did a little bit of Excel. I skipped past the pivot tables. I wanted to show you real quick. This is Python. So what we're gonna do is, I meant to show you, like we did a pivot table in Excel. Let me show you what a pivot table looks like in Python. So I'm gonna skip over these first parts. Basically, we're just gonna get the data. These first 3 sections are all about just opening up. This is like opening up your Excel files, right? We're opening up the file. We can look at the data just like we did in Excel. And then this is Anaconda. So I might be really insecure, but this is helpful. Like I liked this. I liked having an icon to open. I liked having an interface to be able to click into. And when you click launch in here, it actually will fire up Chrome or whatever browser you're using. And it will open up, this is just like your Windows Navigator or Finder. All right, this is my folder structure, and you can navigate. So these are my navigation windows. I've got this churn analysis running in this @code folder in my documents. And that's what we're looking at here. This is a Python notebook. Very clean, very friendly. This is what I cut my teeth on, like in the beginning. And part of it was visually, it's just out of the box. It's a very visual, aesthetically pleasing interface, as opposed to that, which I've come to really appreciate this. This is R, not as aesthetically pleasing, but nonetheless. So let's go to charting, not charting. There's my pivot. So this is the equation for a pivot table. Very intuitive. They call it pivot table. That sounds like a silly thing to mention, but when we get into R, like there's a huge dividing piece between Python and R. They call it pivot table. And the values you pass in are very intuitive if you've used Excel. What value are you going to count? What are your rows going to be? What are your columns going to be? Columns are tenule. And then what do you want to do? Do you want to min, max? Well, not min, max. Do you want to average? Do you want to count? What do you want to do? And so again, very aesthetically pleasing, except for this column of dots, right? You don't get to see the whole data, but it has a very convenient and simple command to spit that out into a CSV file that you can open up in Excel. But you can get, and then you can manipulate it the way that we did and create a table. So in R, I actually did this a bunch of different ways. And this is the one that I personally liked the best. It's in the default library of R. If you don't know what that means, don't worry about it. So if I hit table, which I've already done, this here at the bottom in the console, that's what it looks like. And it doesn't look great. And I guess you can also output it to a CSV. But this command is not intuitive. And it's not entirely comfortable. This is another option. There's a library called the tidyverse in R, which I want to get better at using. And I don't think that's running right. But this is the command. Like, I might not be using it correctly, which sorry. But this is what you use for pivot table. It's called pivot wider. And again, it's getting there, but it's not nearly as easy to use as the Python. So moving on to the analysis step. Okay, you can't do that analysis in Excel. How are we on time? We're buttoned up. Data analysis tools. So there's an analysis tool pack, which I'm surprised I don't have that turned on. If you come into the analysis tool pack, you've got a bunch of things that you can use. That's your standard regression. Linear regression is not available. There are some things that you can buy to do linear regression in Excel. Python's free, Anaconda's free, and I think it's better. So for what it's worth. Coming into, so we're going to skip ahead. There's this new file called clean data, which basically all I've done is taken all that text and turned it into zeros and ones, because that is what our model tool is going to want to use. And we're pulling it from a library called sklearn. And I'm not going to go through all the code. I can make this code available. If this is something you want to do like yourself, you can have this. Just let me know, I'll send it to you. And you can run it and it'll run. This is very straightforward. You could probably even Google and find someone who's demoed this online as well. Very straightforward application of logistic regression. And I think it's helpful to just see kind of what it looks like relative to what it looks like in R. This is a lot of code. And when you look at R, there's a lot more code here than there is in R, which might be a reason to use R. The reason is sklearn will not let me just run a logistic regression model on the raw data. They'd want me to go through good data science practice by creating a training and test set. That's because most data modeling is used to make predictions about an unknown set of data that's coming in the future. But that's not what we're doing here. We just want to get intuition about the data on hand. We're not really concerned about trying to predict some unknown data set that's going to come in the future. So we don't need to do training and testing. I'm sure someone could make a comment about testing model fit and doing ROC analysis and all that kind of stuff. The linear regression has those tools built into it, and we're going to take a look at those and spend time looking at those. In any case, I'm going to skip ahead down to the part that matters, which is our output. And I want to leave time for questions, and we're already a little bit over. So if you want me to go more in depth on this, ask in the questions, because I need to wrap this up.
If I could ask one
Sure.
question,
Go for it.
Do you train it with the whole data set?
On this one, I didn't. On this one, there's a holdout, and the holdout, I did a test size of 10%.
So you just shoved 10% through there.
I did 10% is my test. So I use 90% as my training.
Okay, gotcha. And do they intersect with each other, or it's like literally
no.
10% as your
No.
okay.
So what it does is it takes 10% and holds it out and trains on the other 90. And then if you want to create, so let me be clear, we're not doing a model.
We do have one other question. If
yeah, go for it. Yeah, let's ask it.
Yeah, Fitz is asking if you would share, like, how do you think about the data to determine the factors that you think are pertinent to start like digging into?
That's a great question. The answer is I use SAS, and it's in my way. I can't get to the. So I use SAS Studio to do this, and SAS Studio, I don't have time to get into this. I thought SAS was prohibitively expensive, but there's a free version. And SAS actually, its model will do essentially what it does is it starts the model off with one variable and it adds each variable, and you put a kind of threshold value of significance. And if it meets that threshold, then it includes it in the model. And if it doesn't, it drops it. And it just sequentially adds your variables to optimize your fit. Otherwise, you have to do that manually. I still did that after I looked at the coefficients and the p-values. I still did a little bit of that on my own, specifically around internet service, because you'll notice in this specific data set, there's a lot of overlap between internet service and some of these others, like online backup, online security, streaming movies, streaming TV, like those are highly correlated with internet service. And so I was wondering if that was interfering with my model. So some of it is just looking at the nature of it and just, I don't want to call it common sense, but just actually looking at your data and seeing what you're looking at as opposed to just a mathematical rubric. But there are techniques that you can leverage in, you can do that SAS algorithm by hand. But I want to look at my p-values, and then I want to look at how big my coefficients are. And the big thing for logistic regression is these coefficients, unlike regression, we're still at this point, I don't know if you can see this highlighting. At this point, we're still in that S model. We're looking at, I'm going to skip the math term. It's not a straight, you can't really interpret these coefficients directly, which is why you've got to do what's called look at the odds ratio. And this can give you a more intuitive sense. And again, what we're going to look at is the significance of each factor. But then we also want to look at the size of the odds ratio. So basically, when you're looking at these, you will need to spend some time reading this about odds ratio. If it's close to 1, it's essentially like odds are looking like what are the odds of winning to losing. And if it's 1 to 1, there's really nothing there. So if it's 1, that means there's not a whole lot there. And as it's close to 1, so a lot of these values are 1 or really close to 1. And then you've got 59, which says essentially like the largest factor here is monthly charges. And everything else is relatively like insignificant. So I would look at this on first glance and say, they don't really care about the internet package. They just don't like how much they're being charged. Which is a great segue to the next slide. That was my initial impression of looking at this. Reporting. It's really important to take some time. Like after you get to this step, walk away and come back to it and spend some time reporting. And what I mean by that is not like when you think about reporting, you're normally thinking about tables, charts, formatting technique, and that's important. Presentation matters. But what's the story? what is going on here? And there's always a story. And I really like this quote from myself that I'm going to read. We use data to inform the stories we already tell ourselves. That's really important to know. When a researcher tells a particularly compelling story, we publish it. And we tell ourselves the facts speak for themselves. They never do. The facts are always spoken for. And so these are just numbers, right? What story is it? What's the story here? And I think what I saw here is like, they're not being charged a lot is not super significant. When I started looking at this, what I realized is, yeah, this trend that we're looking at over here, it sure looks like these two customers are churning at a higher rate. But what's more interesting is when they're churning. Like, there's a ton of people that are signing up and a month later, they're gone. And the second month, like, the second largest amount of people leaving are leaving in the second month. And so why is it that people are leaving so fast? And so is the question our product offering, or are we not selling these people right? And so, you know, if I was consulting, so as I consulted on this, that was my takeaway was, yeah, I think internet's a red herring. I think you need to spend some time looking at your sales process. And so, again, like it's kind of a different version of just look at the data. But take a second and you know, not just mechanically apply, you know, looking at p-values and numbers, which is, you know, that's the technique, that's the math. But just like really what's going on, right? And what's the story? What do you see? And as we slowly come to the hour, ship, like learn to ship and ship what you have. Perfect is the enemy of good. Get it done, get it out, and ship. And that is the end of my presentation. I hope I've inspired you to start your own project. Feel free, like I said before, feel free to reach out. If you want to steal my code and use it, just reach out to me. LinkedIn, whatever you use, I'm pretty much Rho Lall everywhere. And I'm Rho@agilityads.com. You can reach out to me there as well. And yeah, I'd really like to, if you have a project that you have in mind, I'd really be interested in hearing about it. So feel free to share what you're working on. I'd be happy to help you out with whatever you're doing. I love Peter Drucker. And with that, I will leave the remaining three minutes for, actually, we go till 11:15. I thought we were going till 11.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was trying to check without losing track of moderating exactly when the end was.
So ended just on time. Like,
yeah. And yeah, but I mean, you know, I don't see any other questions. If someone tried posting something in Slido, please, you know, maybe try posting it in Slack. I haven't seen any questions come through there. So I don't have a positive confirmation that it is working other than my own question, which was there as a test. But so maybe
yeah, and I skimmed a little at the end. And so I didn't realize we've got time. So if someone wants more detail, every time I've asked, I always skim the math and I'm just like, please ask for more. And no one ever does. And I've learned to not be offended. It's okay. I love what I do, right? I love the math. I watch math on YouTube. It's great. But I respect that, you know, other people prefer to watch football.
Well, I mean, you have some time. I think if you wanted to go through it, I would be interesed.
Yeah. What do you want to see?
No one is saying don't.
No one's saying don't. So I'm going to jump into the SAS real quick, because when I looked at the SAS, I'm going to close these since we have the time.
And we do have a question briefly, you know, as a statistics person, do you prefer R or Python And, if so, why?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I was going to talk about, I feel like I poo-pooed on R a little bit here. At first, I felt like this was just a very archaic interface that I wasn't a fan of. But what I do like about R, and what I don't like about Python, is those 3 dots in the middle. Like you can't, just so we see what I'm talking about when I come back up to this. And it does it here too. These 3 dots I'm trying to line it up like right in the middle of the screen. It doesn't give you everything. There's a scroll bar. Why are you cutting stuff out? Why can't I see everything? Like, that's ridiculous. Not with R. R knows how to use a scroll bar. And if that wasn't good enough, it's hard to do this on a Mac. It's a little bit harder. Why are you not giving me what I want? This window pops out. I can't get it to pop out. It's shy. But I promise you, it does completely pop out of the window. It's not going to do it. I don't know why. That's a cute, like, to me, sorry I couldn't demo it because it doesn't want to. But I promise it does. To me, that was a huge advantage over R. That's like a superficial thing. But in addition to that, R is, if you're statistically minded, if you work in finance, R is probably a better fit for you. A lot of financial companies and kind of more established companies, they don't just require to use R, they require to use specific versions of R. And the math part of me really likes R more. But the kind of more emotional part of me likes Python. I don't know if that answers your question, but yeah, I like how mathy R is. And the fact that it's preferred by financial firms, and it's built for statisticians, it's built by statisticians, is very attractive for R. So if you're kind of in that mode, R might be a better, like, try out R. I like they both have like really strong pluses for me.
Great, thank you. We do have a question about, is there like a binding from a Jupyter notebook to R rather than to Python?
Yes, yes, you can absolutely do R in a notebook. So if you wanted to do R code in fact, I've never done it. But there's R right there. Actually, that opens up R Studio. I have never used R in a notebook, but let me try something real quick. Where's there you are. So I closed out of here. So I'm back in the Jupyter. I click new, and I don't think I have R installed as a language in this. This is a new Mac. So I did not install R on this instance of Anaconda, but you can install R, and I'm pretty sure you can open up an R notebook, just like I opened up this Python 3 notebook. Actually, I didn't open it up. This is how you open up Python. You just click on that. Oh, never mind. It didn't like it. I'm not going to worry about it. But yeah, you can do R in a notebook. And it's not just Anaconda. There's all kind of, like, Microsoft has their version. There are lots of different notebooks if you want like a different flavor. I really like Anaconda because if you're new and if you've never done any type of data science before, it just has everything that you need all in one download. And the experience downloading it on a Mac is worth the price difference between a Mac and a Dell. Setting up R Studio and Anaconda on this Mac was a really nice experience. The Dell, plan to spend like an afternoon getting it all set up, because it's not an insignificant amount of data that you need to download off the internet and then set up.
All right, we have a couple of comments, which I'll just mention because it will make it a little bit more interactive. So One person has mentioned they prefer Python, but some of their friends prefer R, which I think, talks to how even firms will require you using R. And then also there's a comment that speed of visualization might be faster in R, at least in that person's experience. I'm not sure if you have seen the same or want to speak to any of that.
I haven't. I will take you at your word. I've not done visualization in R. I do know that it's preferred, right? Like a lot of the the feels of R are included in the Seaborn package for Python. I think if you're just getting started, there's a little less of a learning curve for Python. But like I said before, I really like R. I think if I was going to, my preference would be to just, if I'm going to do a pivot table, I'll just do pivot tables and something else. Hey.
Hey, Rho.
I was just, did you pull me in or did I log in?
I think you logged back in. I'm not sure we could issue a pull request.
Yeah, okay. So I probably need to share my screen. That was weird. That was weird. Okay. So you should be able to see my screen.
Yep, looks good.
So to answer the question, so R is not as strict about, like I could just jump into the model. I didn't need to. It's good practice to do train test split on your data. If you're creating a model that you're going to use to predict, like Netflix recommender system or just any type of model that you're using to predict a future outcome, that's like good practice, and that's what most data science is about. But when you're looking for insight, it's not as strong a need. So it's really nice that you can just jump into the model. This is a different model than we ran in Python. I didn't include all the variables because I was coding this late last night so that I could present on it. But I mean, this is literally all the code. It's significantly less. And you get to, right, you can get the same main pieces that you want. And so I forget what the question was, but the answer is it's significantly less code in R, which is a plus.
Yeah, I think it was just around the preference of R versus Python generally.
Right. And so I think that's a strong reason to want to do things in R. R also has, I think every language has things that make it unique. Like if you think of each language kind of structures how someone thinks about tasks and modeling. R has this piping feature, which looks like percent greater than percent. And it just makes it very fluid where you can go from one action to the next. So when you're wrangling data, that functionality of R is really great. And so, yeah, I think I've definitely used Python more, but I have a strong affinity and respect for R. Like I want to use Python more. So I actively look for projects where I think R will give me an advantage over Python. Any other questions?
I don't see any, but I'm going to read back through to make sure I didn't miss any. Please feel free to post again if your question hasn't been addressed. We've had a lot of interaction, which is great.
Yeah.
But I may have missed something. So it looks pretty good. People were very disappointed when you froze, though. There was
were they? There was an outpouring. Like, no, he's gone.
Obviously up to you. If you want to give it any more time. I want to thank you. This has been very informative for me, and you've also stimulated a lot of conversation, which doesn't happen all the time.
Fantastic.
So that's been really great. I'm going to check back into the Slido really quick.
So while he's doing that, guys, I had a chance to meet Keith before the meeting. He's the unsung hero, and Greg was in here earlier. Personal thanks to both of you. Like these guys, huge dedication of time and energy. And Keith has been a fantastic moderator. And so while he's doing his job, I just want to say thank you to Keith. Like, thanks for kudos, top 10, like, great job. Very appreciative of Keith and the work he's put into making this a really interactive and positive experience.
Thank you so much. It's been my pleasure.
All right, guys, I'm going to sign off because I think we're done.
Great. Thanks, Rho.
Cool. Talk to you later.